Okay, hello everybody and welcome to another Storyline Magic live stream brought to you by Discover eLearning. So it's been a minute since our first session, and this is effectively going to be part two, follow on from our first workshop where we were using GSAP, the GSAP animation library inside Articulate Storyline to bring an illustrated character to life. And yeah, ultimately we got so far through that project, so today is an opportunity to get back in, and obviously we have some unfinished business to attend to here with our Fox character. So I'm going to be bringing us all up to speed in terms of some of the things that we covered in that first session. But the video is still available on YouTube, and you can also find it on the Discover eLearning website as well. So you can effectively jump back into the actual technical stuff and the code side of stuff in a bit more detail when you perhaps wish to do so. So before we get started, just very quickly, just some updates from Discover eLearning. So this is for the benefit of, unfortunately, for the people who are joining us from the United Kingdom. Later this year, as you can see here on screen, on the 5th of September, I've been invited back to be a part of the Learning Network's Mastery Day. And this is taking part this time at Dovecote Studios in Edinburgh, Scotland. And the last time we did a master session, e-learning development mastery session, was really good, really fun, really creative session. And I'll just show you in terms of what's happening throughout that day at this moment in time. So it looks like we've got Martin Sinclair from Mind Tools is doing a session on Articulate Rise in the morning, followed by a deep dive in Evolve. So the Evolve authoring tool, very similar to Rise, of course, follow on from that. And then I'm coming in the afternoon to do some stuff in Articulate Storyline. So not entirely sure exactly what yet, because I keep changing my mind, but whatever it is, it's definitely going to be fun, creative, and something really interesting to take part in. So I hope that if you're interested, you will sign up and come along to that. It is a free event, and not speaking on behalf of the Learning Network, but I think you can just sign up for this without actually even being a member. So it's kind of free, open community event. So, if you have the opportunity, definitely take advantage of that. And then on Discover eLearning side, just to let you know that we have some of our own events coming up. So on the Discover eLearning website, on the new training section, this is a definite benefit for people on the across the pond, as it were, over in the United States. We've partnered with an American firm called AmanaNet, and we effectively co-author and co-deliver online learning online learning training events over the course of 2 days that cover both beginner and advanced level Articulate Storyline development. And we also have a new one-day event that you can actually see here coming up on the 30th of July, which is a one-day master event specifically targeting JavaScript development and looking at integration of Storyline with other external tools through Fetch method, for example, and also GSAP. So we do quite a lot of work with the animation platform GSAP. So there's an opportunity to take advantage or do that more intensely, let's say, than what we'd be doing here. So please do check those out. There's quite a bit of a calendar, a bit of a schedule I've clearly got ahead of me for the rest of the year. So there's lots there to take advantage of for Storyline developers without a shadow of a doubt. So back to what we are going to be looking at today, getting my project here once again. Where's that window gone? Okay, there we go. Brilliant. Okay, so just to get up to speed, as it were, in terms of where we left things, or where we were when we conducted part one of our workshop here. So the animated character that I have in my project here in Articulate Storyline, this was effectively an illustration file which I got from the Envato kind of library, as it were. Obviously, if you've heard of Envato, if you use Envato for elements for different assets, as it were, huge library, and if you're looking for characters of any sort of ilk, you'll find lots of different examples there. So this character, this Fox character effect in effect has just come straight from Envato, and then I used Photoshop to break the character down. Hopefully I can zoom in here so you can see things a little bit more clearly. How do I do this again? Gosh, I've forgotten my hotkeys already on this. Hopefully that's zoomed in enough for the benefit of everybody watching right now, we broke that character apart into different PNG files in order to effectively set up a composition of the character for the different elements that we want to animate. So in effect, I want to be able to animate the head shape, the tail shape, some of the motion around the eyes, etc. We're going to be doing that today. So in effect, what I need effectively is all of those elements separated out into their own PNG files, and then I've used the grouping system in Storyline to collate and bring those together as a composition, as it were, that's easy to move and port and you know, kind of move around on the screen if I wish to do so as well. So let me go ahead and jump into my monitor full screen here, and then we'll get into this in a bit more detail. Obviously, doing a live stream is a real juggle. So, like, we've got like 3 or 4 screens, just like trying to keep on top of absolutely everything that's going on. Okay, so where we left things, the work that we did in our first session, we started things off by focusing on the fox's tail. So in effect here, what we have in the group is the tail PNG separated as its own image within the group, and then using the power of JavaScript and using the power of the GSAP library combined with a little bit of the new JavaScript API that Storyline, that Articulate Storyline provides to us, we targeted that shape using GSAP in order to create a rotation effect, and we've effectively got a sort of TikTok effect going on. So there's kind of a different, what we say, velocity and different time, different speed, as it were, that happens as the tail moves clockwise, counterclockwise. So with that in place, and also just to quickly show you the JavaScript that we had in place for the head, or where we've left things with the head rotation, as it were, we've just got that moving, as you can see, minus 20 degrees. So that's effectively 20 degrees counterclockwise. So it just creates that sort of tilt of the entire head shape. So because that head group is as a matter of fact, a group in Articulate Storyline that you can see right here within the composition of the Fox group itself. That means that the entire group is going to animate in the same way. So the head group, as you can see, contains the eyebrow shape, it contains the eyes, it contains the mouth, it contains the actual background head, as it were. So all of those are individual compositions that all make up the Fox character. So if we go ahead and preview the slide and take a look at the end result, as it were, or where we ultimately left things, the JavaScript occurs as soon as the Fox animation in has finished. So there's a transition in effect, and then those JavaScript calls are made, and that gets things moving with regards to the tail shape, and it also rotates the head, as you can see. So he's kind of leaning into the laptop at this moment. Okay, so just checking in. I'm just checking on the quality of the stream and everything for everyone that's watching right now, making sure everything's coming through okay. And yeah, hope you're having a good day so far, and looking forward to the weekend, everybody. Alrighty, so let's get into some more work, some more learning here in our project. So what I'd like to do, pick things up, is at this moment in time, the way that I've got my animation set up is that, as you can see, the Fox, or rather the JavaScripts that we've created so far using GSAP, are set to play when the animation complete of the Fox group animating in. So 0.75 seconds, and then the JavaScript effectively hits. But what I'd like to do is make this interactive. So I'd like to be able to use my mouse cursor in order to actually get the head moving. I'm quite happy for the tail shape to just kind of play automatically, but I'd like the head movement to actually be something that I can control using my mouse cursor. So in Articulate Storyline, of course, we do have a trigger event, which experts in Articulate Storyline, I can see Nate's in the room. Utter legend. Thanks for joining us, Nate. You can see that we do have this ability to set an event of when the mouse hovers over a particular object, for example. Now, that's fine, as it were, because that could potentially trigger the JavaScript. But what I want to happen is for a mouse out event to effectively do the reverse, as it were. So because we don't have that ability, as it were, to easily set up a separate JavaScript call for both a mouse hover and a mouse hover away event, like two separate scripts, as it were, we're going to be setting up the event, the event listener, as it's called, within JavaScript completely by script, as it were. So we're going to be taking advantage of the mouse enter and the mouse leave event listeners. So we're going to be setting those up within our script and using those in order to trigger what's happening within our JavaScript. And as I'm doing my work here, as I'm writing, I'll try my best to keep things zoomed in. I'm sure there's a hotkey that I can use to zoom in even further whilst I'm on a roll here. Or let me just take a little breather and I'll see if I can find what that hotkey is. So live zoom, control up and control down to control the zoom level. Okay, let's give that a go. So control 4 and then control up. Perfect. Okay, so much better for the purpose of everyone following along on the stream. Okay, so effectively what we've got going on here, our GSAP event is going to move, it's going to rotate our head shape 20 degrees over 0.6 seconds. And that's effectively going to happen as soon as the script runs, because we've effectively got that function set up, the GSAP.to function, in order to make that run. But I would like it to, the animation to effectively be paused and wait for me to trigger it as part of a separate script, i.e. an add event listener script. So what I'm going to do is put in place another property that GSAP provides to us called paused. So that's P-A-U-S-E-D. And this, in effect, is just a Boolean value. It's a true, false value. So if we say paused true, that will mean that this GSAP property, as it were, this GSAP animation, will not play when the script is triggered, but it is, in effect, waiting there, ready to be triggered by some other event. So let's go ahead and set up our event listeners now. So what we want to do is apply an event listener to our, well, technically I don't want to apply it to the head group, because that would just mean you're only going to move, the head group shape is only going to move if we are moving the head shape, of course. So I'd much rather that we target the entire Fox group. So we'll have to set up another query selector method here in order to attach the Fox group to a constant that we can then call later on. I just realized that I hit escape. I was doing this in the last workshop. I kept on hitting escape and it kept on deleting my work. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up another constant for the overall Fox group. And we're going to assign that to or rather we're going to assign a query selector method to that constant. So we want to do exactly the same thing as what we did over here when we brought in our data model ID of the head group. And that was in effect taking advantage of the JavaScript API new to Articulate Storyline. Effectively allows us to get very simply, very quickly, that data model ID in order to reference elements within our project on our slide, as it were. So we can do that, or we can get the reference for the overall Fox group by just using this drop down that you can see here. And if I go ahead and bring in the object reference for the Fox group, oh, it might have put it at the bottom, has it? Where's it gone? Oh, I need to click the add button, of course. Sorry, I haven't used this in a hot minute. There we go. So there's the data model ID for the Fox group. So we can just go ahead and set up a data model ID query here. So I've used single quote, and then within the single quote, I've used square bracket in order to define a specific property of an element within my DOM, within my document object model. And we are going to be searching for an object that has a document model ID of this value right here. And, you know, we could set up some if statements in order to double check that that definitely is the right value, as it were, and we're definitely getting what we need. But just for the sake of brevity here, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to assume that we're getting the Fox group exactly as we need it, as it were, right now. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and set up our event listener to attach to that specific object in the DOM, i.e. our overall Fox group. So to do that, we're going to use the reference name, the variable name, or the constant name, as it were, Fox group, and then we're going to use .add event listener. And that's all one word, but we're using camel case for the capital E and for the capital L. And then we open and close round brackets, open and close parentheses. And then the first thing that we effectively need within the parenthesis is the actual event listener name itself in single quotes. So the event listener that we're going to be using is going to be mouse enter. Now, I would always encourage using the web API for pointer events whenever setting up JavaScript in Articulate Storyline for the purpose of targeting multiple device types, as it were. So a pointer down event, for example, is much more powerful than a mouse down event, which might not cover, for example, tap events on different devices, as it were. We are using mouse enter here because, in effect, it won't necessarily affect mobile device, or rather, I'm just kind of focusing on desktop here for the purpose of this workshop. And we know that mouse enter is effectively going to cover our needs. So that's going to be our event listener that we're going to use. And then after a comma, we can use what's called an arrow function, which effectively is like a simplified syntax for setting up the event, as it were, that's going to take place as a result of this event listener action taking place. So we start things off with an open and close parentheses once again, and then immediately after this we create an arrow by using the equals and greater than symbol. And you can actually see there that Articulate Storyline's JavaScript editor, as kind of limited as it is right now, to be perfectly frank, does do some JavaScript based kind of modifications, as it were, and there are some color schemes going on, even though it's really, really hard to see sometimes that there are some color schemes going on. I would love, of course, for there to be a more enhanced experience here. Definitely the ability to increase the font. I mean, good God. So, okay, anyway, back on track. Let's go ahead now and open and close curly brackets, and it's within the curly brackets that we can define our JavaScript for the event that's going to effectively take place here. So what we're going to do is we are going to effectively trigger the head group. So actually, I realize I've missed a critical step here. In order to actually target or rather to target this via our event listener here, we need to assign this to its own constant. Because we'll effectively be referencing the constant within the event listener. So we're going to type const equals, and we'll call this head tilt, for example, with camel case once again. And then we can use an equals symbol in order to, oh, hang on, what have I done here? That should not be there. const head tilt equals, and then we assign the GSAP animation to the constant. So now within our event listener here, if I can perhaps zoom in once again for everyone watching at home, we can now target the head tilt constant, and we can just tell GSAP to play that animation. So .play, open and close parentheses, and a semicolon. So that will play the event now when our mouse enters the area of the Fox group. All being well, of course. So let's go ahead and click OK on this and preview the result. So thankfully, as you can see, the pause effect has come into play because the animation just hasn't kicked in immediately. It's waiting for us to perform the action. And if I now perform the action, fingers crossed with the mouse, there we go. So there is the GSAP animation taking place and rotating that, that overall group to the value of 20 degrees. So now that we have that in place for our mouse enter, event listener, we can go ahead and set up a separate event listener for the mouse leave event. So effectively, what happens when the mouse goes into the zone and what happens when the mouse leaves the zone. So to save some time, we can just go ahead and copy and paste that entire block for that initial event listener that we set up. And as I say, we're going to change the actual event within the single quotes there from mouse enter to mouse leave. Now, what do we want to happen when the mouse leaves the zone, as it were, when we move away from the group? Well, thankfully, once again, GSAP provides us with another action that we can trigger using JavaScript in order to achieve this. So we can type head tilt dot reverse. So what's great about reverse is it's kind of treating the GSAP.2 animation as almost its own encapsulated timeline. So it's like a 0.6 second timeline event, as it were. So .play is going to move the timeline forward, and then the scrubber in effect is going to stop at the very end of the timeline. And then reverse is going to send the timeline movement the other way. So whether or not we are halfway through the animation or whether we're all the way through the animation, we're going to get that nice smooth reverse back to where we were initially. So once again, all being well, if I go ahead and click OK on this and come back to full screen and preview the slide. So once again, there's our movement in, and then if I move my mouse away, there's the movement out. So there we go. We now have this continuous rocking motion. And if I go very, very quick on this, I can catch him halfway into his animation. And it's just that really slick, really nice movement. You can see that the movement, as it were, of the head, the easing, as it's called, is once again controlled by GSAP. So you can see right now we've got this ease power2.out, as it's called. So that's just a kind of gradual, nice easing into the final position. If we didn't have any easing at all, so if I went ease none, for example, and just previewed this for the sake of showing this to you, and let's go ahead and do the mouse over now. So can you see that? There's no easing applied. It's a constant speed. So that's maybe helpfully showing you with this applied just how good it is in terms of catching the specific moment where the head is in its kind of movement, in its cycle, as it were, and that we're able to control that entirely using the mouse. So let's go ahead and change easing back to power2.out. And then I believe that is everything that I want to do with the head shape. So let's go ahead and continue on and think about some of the elements within the actual head that we could control using GSAP. So let's go ahead and let's clone the JavaScript that we've just been working with, actually, because this will save us some time. So what I'm going to do is let's target the mouth shape. And what I'd like to do is effectively kind of stretch the mouth shape. So, you know, he's a fox character, he's cunning, as it were, and it'd be great if he just has that kind of cheeky smile as he rotates his head, or just kind of feels like he's obviously kind of happy with his laptop, as it were, nice and secure. So let's go ahead and change the animation, what we're actually targeting here for this animation here. So we no longer want to target the head group, we want to target just the mouth shape. So this constant here is no longer required, so I'll just use double quotes, or sorry, double forward slash in order to comment that line out. And then let's go ahead and do a duplicate of any one of these lines, doesn't matter which. And then let's use the JavaScript API once again in order to get the mouth shape just here, and we'll add that in. Superb. Okay, let's go ahead and cut that ID and paste it into the double quotes just here, and we'll call this constant mouth shape. And then let's just remove this from view. There we go. So that's our articulate subscription license money in action there, being able to get that JavaScript get that data model ID. What a great enhancement to what we used to have to do, which was, do you remember, we used to have to go into the accessibility features, right click accessibility, play with the accessibility tag. A lot of people weren't happy with that approach, and I guess rightly so. So it's good that we have this new approach via the JavaScript API. Okay, so let's now go ahead and do something entirely different with our GSAP here. We're not going to be targeting the head tilt, of course, anymore. We're going to be targeting the mouth shape. And we might as well go ahead and change these values now as well. So it's absolutely fine in terms of how we've set this up. So we're using exactly the same trigger actions, as it were, with the mouse in and mouse out event. But this time, of course, we're going to be targeting the mouse shape constant here, the animation that we're setting up in GSAP in order to... I'll tell you what I've done wrong here, because mouse shape has obviously been declared already up here. So this would have to be mouse shape, let's just call it div, I guess. And then that will be what we will animate down here. And then obviously GSAP needs to target the mouth shape via this constant up here. Okay, so as I say, what I want to do with the mouse shape this time is effectively do a lot like a smile. So I'm going to do a bit of a cheat. I'm going to use the scale property that's available in GSAP in order to scale the mouth via its x-axis, or rather across its horizontal plane, as it were. So we're going to basically have it at its original 100% size to begin with, and then we'll stretch it out using the property of scale x. So let's go ahead and use that now. So again, this is a property built into GSAP specifically for adjusting the scale of something, scale of an object using GSAP. So scale x, and the scale value works on a decimal value, as it were. So 1 is treated as 100% of the original size of that object. So if we go ahead and change this to 1.15, for example, we'll be stretching the mouse shape by 15% of its own width, as it were. So I don't want it to go crazy. Obviously, just like a nice subtle smile would be a nice outcome, as it were. So let's... Oh, you know what I've just done? I realised up here I've commented out the wrong group, haven't I? Because we want to comment out that one. Sorry, beg your pardon. Let me just explain there. So what I did was I commented out the Fox group, and we were using the Fox group for the purpose of the mouse over event, of course. So that's why we have Fox group.add event listener down here. So that would have thrown an error because I'd commented it out, meaning that the constant wouldn't have existed. So it is actually the head group that we are wanting to comment out, because obviously that's no longer, I mean, technically we could just go ahead and delete it and get out of the way as well. So we're now using the mouth shape and we're using the Fox group. So let's go ahead and finish off what we were doing. So we need to declare how long the animation needs to play for. So let's go for, say, 0.5, 0.4. Oh, what just happened there? Oh, my number lock wasn't on there, so I might have accidentally deleted something. Everything looks to be in order. Duration, and then of course an ease property. Just exactly the same ease as what we've got for the head shape, so everything just kind of plays in sync, as it were. So power2.out is a kind of default go-to easing within GSAP. And exactly the same as what we did with the previous GSAP sequence for the head shape. If we use paused true, it will just ensure that the mouse shape does not change until we actually perform the mouse enter and mouse leave event, as it were. So hopefully that's made sense as I've explained, and you've been able to follow along there. Let's go ahead and click OK on that and zoom out once again, and then let's preview the result. A shout out to Matt. I just spotted your comment there in YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt. Hope you're having a good day or start of your day so far. And to everyone else as well, just kind of watching along in the background, just really appreciate you being here. So let's go ahead and give this a go. So mouse over event, and hopefully you can see that there's a really nice sort of stretch effect going on now with the mouth shape. I mean, I'll maybe exaggerate it just for the sake of the stream, just in case that's not coming through. Let's maybe go for like 1.3, so it's like 30% of a stretch of his original smile. So hopefully this comes through for you this time round. Can you see that this time? Really wide, nice big smile that he's doing there. So that's really cool. Okay, so I'm happy with the mouth shape. And by the way, hopefully it's clear what's going on there, or why the mouth shape in effect is rotating as at the same time as its scale moving because we have the rotation effect applied to the head group and the mouth shape is in the head group. So in effect, the head group animation with GSAP takes care of the rotation in proportion to the rest of the head shape, and it's just the mouth shape kind of boundary, as it were, that we want to play with when it comes to the scale. So we're targeting the mouth object specifically in order to make that happen. Hopefully that makes sense for everybody watching along at home. All right, then let's continue. And I think this will be really fun, actually. Let's have a little play with the Fox's eyebrows now. So what I'd like to do is effectively have the eyebrows move up and down and have them move in much the same way as what we how we achieve with the mouth shape, etc. So once again, we'll be able to take advantage of some copy and paste in order to achieve that. So I'm going to once again duplicate this execute JavaScript trigger that we've just created for the mouth shape. And this time, rather than having the mouth shape in place here, I want to target the eyebrows. So we want eyebrow left and eyebrow right. As you can see, they're the objects on my slide there right at the very top. So let's add those in to our script just for the sake of getting the ID values, because as I say, I'm going to use the data model ID in order to add them to a constant that we can use with the GSAP methods. So this one will be left. I beg your pardon, I'll zoom in whilst I'm doing this for you. So that one will be the left, and this one will be the right. Okay, and let's just use those namings, those names as well. There we go. All right, looking good. So let's start from a clean slate here for the animation work. Beg your pardon. So this will be our eyebrow L div targeting this constant up here. And then we're going to have another separate constant with separate GSAP properties applied to our other eyebrow shape. So that's eyebrow R, like so. And then let's go ahead and set up our event listeners as well. So we want to basically have eyebrow L div and eyebrow R div play at the same time, animate at the same time. So we can just save a bit of time here by just having both of these play events within the same event listener. So eyebrow L and eyebrow R both playing at the same time. And then let's go ahead and duplicate and pop these down here in order to have these reverse at the same time as well. Okay, looking good. So let's have a think about what we want to do with both of these eyebrow shapes. And what I basically want to do is move them. I just like them to just animate up and animate down. So it's just kind of like, you know, they just kind of go up. Maybe it'd be nice to have them rotate ever so slightly as well, you know, kind of like outwards, as it were. So one would have to rotate anti-clockwise and the other would have to rotate clockwise. And then that just kind of gives that sort of light-hearted look, as it were, as he's raising his eyebrows. So we'll perhaps do that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and use Y%, the Y% property in GSAP. In effect, it's just a nice way of being able to move an object from its spot based on the object's own properties, as it were. So Y% effectively just allows us to move the object so many times its own height, as it were, or its own width. So Y%, if we effectively use Y%, what should we do here? If we use Y% -30, for example, that would move the eyebrows effectively -30% of the eyebrow's own height, as it were. So we'll maybe I'll have a think about this. Actually, we'll play with the value and we'll see what we get out of it. But I'll go ahead and try -30 to begin with, and then, as I say, I want the inner eyebrow to rotate. Oh, sorry. So this is eyebrow L. So I want that to rotate anti-clockwise. So we'll go for rotation colon -10. Let's try just something very subtle, or maybe even -5. Okie dokie. And then for the duration, we've been using, the head animation is 0.6 seconds. So we'll go ahead and use the same value for that, 0.6. We don't want the animation to play right from the beginning, of course. So we want paused to be set to true. And then let's also apply an easing property as well. So ease power to dot out, kind of standard. And I think that'll do. So in terms of the other eyebrow, let's go ahead and just copy the same properties into this separate GSAP.to method. And the only thing I want to change is just that rotation going clockwise rather than counterclockwise for the eyebrow on the right-hand side. But everything else, in effect, just needs to match up. So the main difference, as it were, is just that Y% value being able to move the object and move it relevant to its starting position and its overall width and height, as it were. So let's go ahead and preview the project, and we'll see what we have achieved with that so far. That's really nice. So there's a subtle movement. I mean, obviously, like I say, maybe -30 was a little bit too little. So if we go for like -60, so double what it's currently doing, just to exaggerate it so that it's hopefully coming through nice and clear on the stream for you all. Yeah, there we go. So you just see how we just have that nice movement. I might need to play with the actual movement, because what's funny about how it's currently looking right now is he's kind of like doing like The Rock a little bit in terms of one eyebrow being raised above the other. It doesn't necessarily matter, as it were, but just to kind of mention that, obviously we have that ability to tweak these values further if we wanted to make sure that they kind of look like they are in sync, as it were. So maybe try -50, and yeah, we're getting there. Maybe -40 would be the way to go. Cool. Okay, so I'm happy with how things are looking so far. But what I'd like to do, let's think about what we could now do with this. Well, actually, no, to be fair, I'm happy with the eyebrows. But what we can do is we can bring into the mix an ability to maybe play with the eyes, as it were, at the same time as the eyebrow movement. So what we can take advantage of is the timeline event, as it were, taking place in GSAP, and when the timeline maybe gets to halfway through the animation of the eyebrows moving up, we'll change the state of our eye shapes. So again, this is something that we did in workshop 1. So just to show you, if I go ahead and select, I might need to select it from the timeline here. If you can see there, look, hopefully that's coming through. If I maybe have to zoom in with that state selected. So I have a closed custom state set up for both of the eyes, and that will just change the eye shape to that kind of closed, kind of, it makes the character kind of look happy, content, as it were, with this kind of arch shape for the eye, as it were. So it'd be really cool to have that change taking place at the same time as the animation that's taking place with the eyebrow. So what's really cool about obviously what we've now got the capability to do with the JavaScript API is that we can change the state of the object using the JavaScript API. We can effectively target the object and we can have it change to a different state that way. We can also use variables, the classic way. Maybe I will just use variables because it maybe helps tie in a few things and just uses a bit more of baseline storyline for a few people following along. But just to mention that there's quite a lot to read, as it were, or quite a lot to discover when it comes to the JavaScript API, and the ability to change state of objects within code, within the script itself, can be quite powerful and quite useful. So here's what we're going to do. So we've got our JavaScript for our eyebrows in effect, all set and ready to go here. Now, what I'm going to do is set up an actual GSAP timeline, as it were, that will give us more power and more freedom to do things with both of our shapes here and combine those with events that we can have play when a certain time is met in the timeline of our GSAP animations. So we've just been using the standard GSAP.2 method at this moment in time, or so far, as it were. So what we're going to do instead is set these up as GSAP timelines. Which effectively will have more or less the same properties within them, but will give us a bit more flexibility, as I mentioned, as we go forward and apply some code to tinker with our eye shapes. So let me trying to kind of like get my head around what we're going to do here. So we need to get rid of the constant here, go back to where the days when we had GSAP.2, but we're going to change this to actually define or declare a GSAP timeline. So we'll change this to brow timeline dot 2. So it's no longer GSAP.2, but we're now declaring a custom timeline within GSAP. And what's really nice about this as well is that we'll actually be able to use the same timeline for both objects. So where we have our separate GSAP.2 method for the eyebrow right, we'll just be able to add that straight to our existing timeline instead. So let's crack on. So brow timeline.2. Eyebrow left is what we are animating, and then everything more or less remains the same, but we technically don't need this paused property. Sorry, let me zoom in again for everyone's benefit on the stream. We technically don't need that paused property just because the timeline in object in its the timeline object in GSAP needs to be triggered with play pause anyway, so it won't play until we actually tell it to do so. So we can take that out. And we can define the starting point of the timeline by adding a comma at the end of the closing, a curly bracket there, and then the number 0. Effectively, that's just the kind of syntax that GSAP expects. So we've got our brow timeline declared, and now right here we can go ahead and add to the timeline, brow timeline.2, and add the eyebrow shape to that as well. Once again, we don't need paused, and we just need to add comma 0 within the eyebrow syntax there. And that is our GSAP timeline set with those two objects in place. And I've just hit escape rather than hitting OK. Oh my God. Exactly the same thing that happened in our last stream as well. So sorry, I'm going to have to try and very quickly retrace my steps here. Brow timeline. I keep doing that. This should take away the ability to actually hit the escape key and for it to just delete everything that you've just done in the window. Good gravy. Yeah, let's do that there. Brow timeline.2. And okay, cool. And then we don't need to declare eyebrow L and eyebrow R div plane anymore. Instead, we can just target the timeline itself. So we now just have the one timeline in GSAP2 target, which is brow timeline, beg your pardon. So we now just have that one single object to target in both of our event listeners right here. Dot reverse. Okay. So with that in place, Now let me think. I think I've done this back to front actually. What we would have to do is declare, yeah, we'd have to declare a GSAP timeline first, and then we'd be able to attach objects to it. So yeah, I've kind of skipped a step here. Effectively, what we've done is we've declared, or rather, we've told GSAP which objects we want to add to the timeline and the properties that we want to animate. But we do still need to actually physically declare the timeline. That's where I was getting a little bit hazy in my own mind there. So we do actually need to declare a constant object within our script here, which I'm going to declare above our brown timeline.2 here, in order to bring that timeline to existence. So brown timeline equals, and then we can set up a GSAP.timeline object. And the GSAP.timeline object is set up with round parentheses, round brackets, and double curly brackets, open and close curly brackets. And then we can declare the property of, in effect, how the timeline needs to behave. At this moment in time, all we need to do is tell the timeline to... Now, let me think, actually. If I go ahead and just leave this as is, I wonder, will it still work as is? I'm just wondering if it will actually play, so I might need the paused property. Let's have a look at the inspector, just in case I've done something wrong. Oh, brow timeline is not defined. Let's have a look. Where have I gone wrong with that? Oh, because I've used a capital L on line. That's where I've gone wrong with that. Okay, let's try that again. Obviously, got to be careful with JavaScript and case sensitivity. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you saw that. So in effect, what that's kind of confirmed to me is that the GSAP timeline object does actually play if it's just basically set to play within the script, as it were. So we will need to use the pause property in order to ensure that the timeline does not play until we're ready for it to do so. So let's go back into our GSAP property here, and we can just set up a paused true value in the GSAP timeline properties. So now what we should have, and let me just recap on what we've got here. So we've set up our GSAP timeline and said it needs to be paused to begin with. Then we've added our objects and gave them their own properties. And then in the event listener, we are just playing and reversing the timeline, just the timeline on its own. So with that, we should now have in effect what we had before, but we've got a timeline to work with for the rest of our code. So there we go, that's working. Thankfully, it is working as I had intended, and the eyebrows are moving up and down as a result of that mouse over event. All right, brilliant. So let's now play with our eye shape. So what I'd like to do, as I say, I'm going to use variables to manage this, and this perhaps will be nice and easy and familiar for a lot of you working with variables as part of perhaps your work with JavaScript so far in Storyline. So let's create a variable. Let's create a true-false variable and call it change. Oh, beg your pardon. True-false variable, and let's call it change eye state. And I'm using a true-false variable because it's obviously just a nice way of being able to toggle whether the eye state needs to change, and therefore it changes to this, and if it changes something else. So we'll be able to use the toggle for the purpose of changing the actual state of the eye if it is true or false. I mean, as a matter of fact, we could go ahead and do that right now. So we could set up our triggers, and we could say change state of IL to closed when the variable changes of change eye state if change eye state is equal to true. So that will change it to closed, and then we can have an else change state to normal. So when it's true, it's going to be closed, and when it's false, it's going to be back to kind of the full eye shape. So that's one trigger done, and then we just need to duplicate that in order to target our second eye shape. So we just need to go ahead and change the the specific object on our timeline that we are targeting here. So change state of I are to closed when change I state is true, otherwise change it to normal. Cool. So we're now ready to play with that in our JavaScript. So this is where the kind of fun and where the magic's going to come in. So as I say, we have in effect a timeline that we can play with, and what we can do with that timeline is we can have a specific event, almost like a what are they called again? Sorry, I've had a bit of a brain freeze here. So on the timeline, you can set up cue points. So you can set up cue points in Storyline for when events need to happen at certain points in the timeline. So we can do exactly the same thing with GSAP, with a GSAP timeline. But what's really nice about the cue point in GSAP's kind of world is that we can trigger it going both ways, as it were. So if we were playing forward, we would get to, say, 0.6 of the timeline complete, and then we would change, or we would trigger a JavaScript or trigger a variable change. And then if we go the other way and we play backwards and we get to 0.6 again, we can have it replay, as it were. So we can go from one extreme to the other. So that's what we're going to play with using GSAP right now. So in order to do that, and once again, let me go ahead and zoom into the timeline here. Sorry, not the timeline. Let me go ahead and zoom into the code for you. We have a method, we have a capability, as it were, built into GSAP called onUpdate. So the onUpdate method, in effect, will fire every time a new frame of animation has played. So we can keep effectively firing onUpdate, and it's going to fire every single frame of the animation. And then we can say onUpdate if we are at a certain point in the timeline, or if something has changed or whatever, we can go ahead and make something happen in terms of basically anything in Articulate Storyline. So let's go ahead and use onUpdate. So it's on with a small O and then a capital U, sorry, for update, colon. And then much in the same way as we set up our event listener when we were setting up the add event listener method earlier, we can do exactly the same thing and set up an arrow function for the onUpdate method, just as a way of setting up nice clean code here. So onUpdate. Now, what do we want to do? We want to check on the progress of the timeline. So we want to set up a constant, essentially a variable. Actually, rather than a constant, let's actually create a variable. So var progress equals, and this will be the value of brow timeline dot progress. So that .progress method, as I say, is something baked into GSAP, and I believe what it returns is a decimal value between 0 and 1. So in effect, 0.5 of progress would be 50% of the timeline, and 0.75 would be 75% of the timeline. So we can take advantage of that, and we can say, for example, if the progress is a certain value, i.e. 0.5, 0.6, let's go ahead and change the variable in order to change what's going on our slide in Articulate Storyline. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll use a conditional a condition block here in order to perform that check. So a condition block is always start with parentheses and then start with curly brackets. So the condition is going to be whether the progress value, so this is the value that we have declared up here. So if progress is, let's say, greater than 0.5. I might reduce it, but yeah, let's go for maybe 0.4. Okay, so if we are more than 40% of the animation, then we are going to perform the action within our opening and close curly brackets right here. So if progress is greater than 0.4, we are going to use, the classic, or rather the now very recently, well, not very recently, but modified version of the player.setVar method, but we can just go straight in with setVar, small s, capital V, in order to change a variable value in Articulate Storyline. So let's go ahead and change the variable that we just created that was called change iState. And I'm trying to, so always the thing, like always trying to remember, what did I name that variable, and did I use camel case? And oh, bloody hell. So Anyway, we've got that in place. Fingers crossed. I guess we'll find out soon. And we want to change that variable, of course, to true. Because if we change it to true, we're going to change the state in articulate storyline. So that's going to be cool. Alrighty. So now that we've got that up and running, so if progress is greater than 0.4, change that variable to true. Let's just go ahead and clone the block still within our onUpdate method here. So it's going to check every frame. Is progress greater than 0.4 or is progress less than 0.4? And we could technically use less than and equal or equal to, and then 0.4 won't get missed out of the equation, as it were, but I really don't think it matters. Or to be fair, let's maybe do that. So we can do greater than, is it? Yeah, there we go. So if you just basically use greater than symbol equals, you will get greater than, I guess technically what we would need is just 1. Yeah, because that includes 0.4, and then this one includes anything less than 0.4. So now, even though I'm being really pedantic about it, we are getting everything covered, as it were. But this case, 0.4 is going to change our variable value to false. Okie dokie. Please don't hit escape, Chris. Let's not delete what we've just done, because this is going to be a bugger if I have to type it all out again. So let me just double check everything that I've got going on here. So we are declaring our timeline, and we're saying that if the progress of the timeline is greater than 0.4, we're going to change that variable to true. Otherwise, we're going to change it to false. I think it's lowercase when it comes to changing Boolean values in Storyline. Nate will know this off the top of his head. Honestly, I keep forgetting whether it's all caps or whether it's capital T, capital F. I guess, again, we'll just find out, won't we? And then everything else is just as it was. So in theory, all being well, I should be able to hit OK and preview the slide. And then let's see if it works. So here's our fox character, and then mouse over. Yes, there it is. So his eyes have now changed to the state, and hopefully you saw that it didn't happen immediately. It kind of like he started moving, like basically the timeline was playing of the eyebrows moving up, and then if I now move the mouse cursor away, there we go. So the animation plays for so long, and then his eyes change. So the eye state is not changing immediately like he would in articulate storyline, because of course in storyline you've got the mouse. Sorry, you've got the mouse hovers over event, and that would obviously just be immediate. So it's really nice that we have that capability in GSAP, because it just adds that little bit of variation, just a little bit of extra lifelike animation, as it were, to our character. And, you know, just ultimately just these little tweaks, just these little fine tweaks, as you can see. Hopefully that's one of the key takeaways of this workshop. It's just as you kind of fine tune and as you play with each individual element of the character, that's how you really start to bring his you know, his characteristics to life, as it were. So that is a great result. And really all that's left, all I would want to do is maybe kind of animate his hand, animate the laptop, but we'd be doing the same things. We'd be using the rotation properties and maybe the scale properties. So there's a lot of things, you know, that if I went through them, we would in effect be kind of going through the same motions, the same coding, as it were. So I think that's a really nice place for us to actually stop our project here, actually, and that's really nice, because I just realized, gosh, we're like literally 2 minutes from time. So amazing. It's just amazing that we've actually managed to get all of that in, and yeah, that's playing as I want it to. And of course, from this point on, we could do more with that. In even just straight in storyline, of course, we could start building triggers, maybe like some click triggers when we actually click on the fox. Maybe he does something different, or, you know, just clicking on him, maybe he plays a, you know, like a fox sound effect, or he just starts talking. Obviously, storyline, gosh, it's just like, you know, you can just do everything. Let's face it, there's like so much that you can just do with storyline. It's just an incredible application, and no doubt probably why you're all here, to kind of like see this and just again just get some more ideas for your own work. And I can only imagine, you know, what developers all around the world are kind of building and creating in storyline right now. You see these pockets of activity on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., but obviously there's probably behind closed doors some real cool magic stuff happening as well. So let me go ahead and just bring things to a close now, because as I say, we are coming up to the hour, and I do apologize. I've just maybe want to just quickly dip into the chat just in case if there's any questions here. So Nate, you're asking if it does it ignore transparency? That was quite early in the workshop. I do apologize. Does it ignore transparency? Are we talking about mouse over events? Do mouse over events ignore transparency? That's a good point, actually. Yes, I do believe that the hitbox of the Fox group is what, in effect... Actually, no, that's a good point. You know, let's give this a try. So you can see that the bounding box, hopefully there, Nate. So you've got the bounding box of the entire group here. So let's see whether the animation comes in as I maybe move my mouse over this area. So that's where the transparency would be. Let's give it a go. And then that will obviously answer the question right away. Ooh. Yeah, look. So I'm able... Looks like there's maybe just a little bit of a hitbox maybe over one of the shapes. Maybe that's as we're getting into the head group. And the head group, maybe because it contains a number of different things, maybe has some different hitboxes. But in terms of the actual Fox group mouse over event that we are using in the event listeners, looks like there is a little bit of give, as it were, with the transparency there. So that's interesting. Just over on YouTube as well, just getting some thank you messages. I really appreciate you being here, everyone. Thanks so much. And as I say, this is the Storyline Magic series, and it's going to be a series. It's going to be an ongoing thing. We'll do more. Obviously, I need to try and fit these into my schedule. Obviously, trying to fit these in, and you know, I love doing these events. To be fair, so I want to do more of them. And yeah, I hope you've really enjoyed it. Obviously, I think we need some more things like this. You know, more showcasing of capabilities of Storyline using libraries like GSAP. So I'm happy to at least kind of get the ball rolling in that regard. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for being here, for spending your hour with me. It's now Friday afternoon. If it's time to break away, crack open a beer, go ahead and do that. So yeah, thanks so much, and yeah, take care. Have a nice weekend. Bye for now.